He thought it was just another peaceful day at the park until everything took a turn no one saw coming. A simple act of kindness sets off a chain of events that spirals into something far more intense, putting a world-famous rapper right in the middle of it all. But what he does next? It will leave everyone speechless. Stay with us till the very end to witness the moment that stunned everyone. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. The sun hung low, draping the park in a warm golden glow. Families strolled along winding paths, couples lounged on picnic blankets, and kids laughed as they raced across the grass. The distant jingle of an ice cream truck mixed with the sounds of birds chirping, creating a picture-perfect afternoon where nothing seemed out of place. 6-year-old Lily twirled in circles, her pink dress fanning out like a blooming flower. Her golden curls bounced with every spin, her laughter ringing through the air. In her tiny hand, she clutched a bright blue helium balloon, the string wrapped tightly around her wrist. A few steps behind, her parents, Rebecca and Daniel, walked hand in hand, watching their daughter with fond smiles. "Lily, stay where we can see you," Rebecca called, adjusting the strap of her tote bag filled with snacks, water bottles, and sunscreen, everything needed for a perfect family day at the park. "I'm right here, Mommy." Lily giggled, flashing a mischievous grin before dashing toward the carousel. The colorful horses bobbed up and down to the sound of cheerful carnival music. "She's got your energy," Rebecca muttered with a smirk, nudging Daniel. "You got that right," he chuckled, sipping his coffee. For a moment, their attention shifted to a street performer juggling flaming torches nearby. Rebecca clapped, entertained, while Daniel absent-mindedly checked his phone. Meanwhile, Lily's focus was elsewhere. She spotted a red balloon floating high above, drifting weightlessly against the pale blue sky. Her blue balloon suddenly didn't seem so special anymore. Mesmerized, she took a step forward. Then another. And another. Her pace quickened as if the red balloon was calling to her. Her parents didn't notice. "Did your boss get back to you yet?" Rebecca asked, shifting the tote bag higher on her shoulder. "Not yet," Daniel muttered, tapping at his screen. By then, Lily was already far from them, her small footsteps leading her to the park's edge. The sounds of the carousel faded. The cheerful crowd thinned. Towering oak trees loomed ahead, their tangled branches stretching overhead, filtering the sunlight into scattered patches of shadow. The red balloon had vanished into the sky, but that wasn't what scared her. Lily finally looked around. Her parents were nowhere in sight. Her small face twisted with confusion. She spun in a circle, her pink dress swishing around her knees. "Mommy," she called, her voice uncertain. No answer. "Daddy?" Silence. Her heartbeat quickened. She gripped the string of her blue balloon so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Mommy," she cried, louder this time, her voice quivering. "Daddy." She took a few shaky steps, eyes darting frantically in every direction. Nothing looked familiar. The path she had walked was gone, or maybe she had just wandered too far. She wasn't sure anymore. Her breathing grew shallow. Panic crept in. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, hoping someone would notice her, help her. People walked by, a jogger, a businessman on his phone, a couple walking their dog. But no one stopped. "Mommy," she sobbed, desperation tightening around her throat. Her knees felt weak, and she sank onto a nearby bench, hugging them to her chest. Her blue balloon bobbed beside her, as if trying to comfort her. Minutes passed. Her cries softened into whimpers. Her throat ached from calling out. She sniffled, rubbing at her face with the back of her hand. That's when she saw him. A tall man walking slowly down the path, his white t-shirt loose over dark jeans, a black baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. In one hand, he held a brown paper bag. In the other, a bottle of water. And then, he stopped. Right in front of her. What happened next? No one could have expected. Over his shoulder, his expression calm but unreadable. He had been in situations like this before, situations where people saw what they wanted to see, not what was actually happening. But right now, none of that mattered. Lily mattered. Getting her back to her parents mattered. "Hey, little girl, you lost?" Another voice chimed in, this time from a woman pushing a stroller. Her eyes flicked between Sean and Lily, suspicion lacing her tone. Lily shrank further behind Sean, gripping his fingers even tighter. He let out a slow breath, keeping his voice steady. "She got separated from her parents," he said simply. "We're heading to find a park guard." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge his words, just kept watching them as if she were waiting for something to confirm whatever story she'd already built in her mind. She muttered, her gaze still locked on him as he and Lily kept walking. Sean knew what was coming next before it even happened. A man in khakis and a blue windbreaker stepped forward from a nearby bench, cutting off their path. He had that look, the kind of look people got when they thought they were doing the right thing. "Hey there, buddy," the man said, forcing a tight smile. "Everything okay here?" Sean's jaw tightened for just a second before he exhaled through his nose. He turned slightly, making sure his body wasn't blocking Lily from view. "She got lost. We're heading to a park guard." The man glanced at Lily. "That true, sweetheart?" His voice was softer now, but his eyes never left Sean. Lily hesitated, shrinking back. I got lost," she mumbled. Sean gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, but the man had already pulled out his phone. "You know what? I'll just call security, make sure everything checks out." Sean kept his face neutral. He had a choice here. He could argue. He could get defensive. He could tell this guy to mind his damn business. But he knew in his bones, that none of that would help Lily. So instead, he nodded. "Yeah. Go ahead." Because if it wasn't him standing here, if it was someone else, someone who looked different, someone who fit what people expected, they wouldn't have stopped them. Wouldn't have questioned. Wouldn't have judged before they knew the story. And still, here he was. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide and uncertain. He didn't say a word, just gave her hand one last squeeze. No matter what happened next, he just hoped, prayed, that in all this noise, and all this suspicion, someone was actually out there looking for her parents. Gave her a reassuring smile, even though his stomach felt like it had turned to stone. "We're almost there, kiddo," he said, keeping his tone light, as if he didn't just hear a grown man reporting him for doing the right thing. But he knew what was coming next. The sound of approaching footsteps. Quick, purposeful. "Excuse me, sir." Sean didn't stop walking. Not yet. Not until he had to. But Lily's grip on his hand tightened, and when he glanced down at her, he saw the fear creeping into her wide, innocent eyes. "Sir, stop right there." This time, Sean did. Slowly. Controlled. He turned around to see two uniformed park officers approaching, one gripping a radio, the other resting a hand near his belt. Lily looked up at him, confused. "Are they gonna help us find my mommy and daddy?" she asked softly. Sean forced a small smile, crouching down beside her. "Maybe, kiddo," he said. "Just stay close to me, okay?" She nodded, trust still shining in her eyes. That trust weighed heavier than anything else in that moment. One of the officers, a stocky man with graying hair, stepped forward, his expression tight. "We got a report that a child might be in distress," he said, his eyes scanning Sean from head to toe like he was a damn suspect. "Can you tell us what's going on here?" Sean kept his hands visible, his voice even. "She got separated from her parents," he explained, nodding toward Lily. "We've been looking for them, trying to find a park guard to help." The second officer, younger, arms crossed, eyed their hands still clasped together. "And you're her father?" Sean exhaled slowly. "No. Just someone who saw she needed help." That wasn't the right answer. He could see it in their eyes. Lily frowned, looking between them. Sean's helping me, she said, her little voice cutting through the tension. He's nice. The officers glanced at each other. The first one crouched down, softening his tone. Sweetheart, where's your mommy and daddy? Lily looked confused for a second, then pointed up at Sean again. I told you. We're looking for them. The officer hesitated, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure what to believe. The man who had made the call, the one by the hot dog cart, was still watching, arms crossed, face smug, like he had done something heroic. Sean clenched his jaw but forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. The older officer finally sighed, standing up straight. All right. Let's go find them. We'll take it from here. Sean hesitated for just a second. He knew how this worked. He knew how fast things could go wrong. But most of all, he knew that leaving Lily now, after all of this, didn't feel right. But before he could say anything, a voice cut through the crowd. Lily! A woman's desperate cry. Everyone turned. Rebecca came running down the path, her face pale, her eyes frantic. Daniel was right behind her, scanning the park like a man who had just woken up in a nightmare. Lily gasped. Mommy! Daddy! She dropped Sean's hand and took off running, her little legs carrying her straight into her mother's arms. Rebecca scooped her up, clutching her like she might disappear, sobbing into her curls. Daniel wrapped himself around them both, his eyes squeezed shut, his body shaking with relief. Sean let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The officers stepped back. The tension in the air shifted. The man by the hot dog cart suddenly seemed a lot less interested in the scene he had started. Lily wriggled in her mother's arms, turning back toward Sean. Sean helped me, she said brightly. I got lost, and he stayed with me. Rebecca's tear-streaked face lifted. Her eyes locked on Sean. For a moment, no one said anything. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, Lily still clutched in her arms. You, her voice broke. She swallowed hard. You stayed with her? Sean nodded. She was alone. I just wanted to make sure she got back safe. Rebecca's face crumpled. Without hesitation, she reached out, gripping his hand in both of hers. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Daniel stepped forward, his voice thick. Man. He shook his head, running a hand over his face. I don't even know what to say. His eyes flicked toward the officers, then toward the crowd that had started to disperse. His jaw tightened. He saw it. He understood what had just happened. And he didn't like it. Come on, baby, he said, wrapping an arm around Rebecca and Lily. Let's go home. As they walked away, Lily peeked over her mother's shoulder, waving her little hand. Bye, Sean. He lifted a hand in return. Bye, kiddo. And then, just like that, they were gone. Sean stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, exhaling slow. He felt the eyes on him still, but they weren't the same anymore. They weren't full of suspicion or judgment. Maybe, just maybe, some of them were full of shame. He turned and walked away, the weight in his chest a little heavier than before. Because no matter how much good he tried to do, no matter how right his intentions were, he knew that next time, it could all go very differently. And that was the part that scared him the most. Into his back, pinning him down. A sharp jolt of pain shot through his ribs as his arms were yanked behind him, cold steel snapping around his wrists. The world spun for a second, the sound of Lily's cries cutting through the chaos like a knife. Stop! Leave him alone, she screamed, struggling against Officer Grant as he gently tried to pull her back. Her tiny hands reached for Sean, desperation in every movement. He didn't do anything. He was helping me. Sean gritted his teeth against the rough asphalt, the taste of dust and blood in his mouth. His breath came hard and fast, but he stayed still. Because fighting back? That would only make it worse. The crowd had grown now. People muttered, some outraged, others just watching, recording, documenting. The air crackled with tension. Jesus, you see that? That guy didn't do a damn thing. Why'd they tackle him? The girl was with him. Someone find her parents. But Reed didn't care about the noise. He pressed harder, his knee digging in. You like scaring little girls, huh? He muttered under his breath, tightening the cuffs even more. Sean clenched his jaw, breathing through the pain. I was helping her, he managed to say, his voice strained but steady. Lily. A voice broke through the chaos of Rebecca. She was sprinting toward them, Daniel right behind her, his face pale, eyes wild with panic. The moment Rebecca saw her daughter crying, saw the man on the ground in cuffs, saw the way the officers had tackled him like an animal, her breath caught in her throat. Mommy! Lily sobbed, wriggling free from Officer Grant's grip and running straight into her mother's arms. They took Sean. They think he's bad, but he's not. He helped me, Mommy. He helped me. Rebecca froze, looking between her daughter and the man pinned to the ground. Then her eyes snapped to Reed, still on top of Sean. Get off of him, she shouted, fury shaking her voice. He was helping my daughter. Reed blinked, confusion flickering across his face. Ma'am. Daniel stormed forward, shoving past the officers. What the hell is wrong with you? He barked. That's the guy who saved our kid. The weight on Sean's back eased as Reed hesitated. Grant stepped closer to his partner, uncertainty creeping in. The crowd around them had turned. The energy shifted. Uncuff him, Rebecca demanded, her voice shaking with rage. Now. For the first time, Reed actually looked at Lily. Tear-streaked, furious, still clinging to her mother. I told you, she sobbed. He was my friend. Grant exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand down his face before nodding toward Reed. Let him up. A tense beat passed. Then, with an irritated grunt, Reed finally eased off. He roughly pulled Sean up to his feet, unlocking the cuffs with an angry clink. Sean rolled his sore wrists, exhaling slowly, the weight on his chest heavier than ever. He didn't look at Reed. Didn't look at Grant. He looked at Lily. The second she saw his hands were free, she wiggled out of her mother's arms and ran straight to him. Sean, she sobbed, throwing her arms around his waist. Sean knelt down, pulling her close, his voice soft. I'm okay, kiddo. I promise. Rebecca stepped forward, her face full of shame, fury, and heartbreak. I am so sorry, she said, voice thick with emotion. This should have never happened. Daniel nodded, rubbing a hand over his face. You saved our daughter. And they, his jaw tightened as he glared at the officers. They treated you like a damn criminal. Sean sighed, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. It's not the first time, he admitted quietly. And it won't be the last. Rebecca's throat tightened at that. She turned to the officers, her voice cold. You owe this man an apology. Reed looked like he'd swallowed glass. Grant at least had the decency to look ashamed. Grant cleared his throat. We made a mistake. Reed gritted his teeth. Yeah. Sorry. It was the kind of sorry that didn't mean a damn thing. Sean didn't answer. He just stood up, rubbing his sore wrists, looking out at the sea of watching eyes, the camera still rolling, the quiet judgment still lingering in the air. Rebecca looked at him, her eyes full of gratitude and guilt. If there's anything we can do to make this right. Sean shook his head. Just take care of your little girl. Rebecca swallowed hard, nodding as she hugged Lily tighter. Sean turned to leave. The whispers, the stares, the weight of it all pressing down on him. And as he walked away, he already knew. By tomorrow, the video would be everywhere. And still, nothing would change. Of the cruiser's dashboard camera, its red light blinking steadily. It was watching. Recording. But Sean knew better than to put his faith in cameras. Cameras caught everything, but justice didn't always follow. He forced himself to breathe evenly, to stay calm, to keep his mind sharp. He wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Yeah, Reed continued, still scrolling on his phone. Lucky we got there when we did. Who knows what you were planning to do with that little girl? Sean's jaw clenched so hard it ached. His entire body burned with restrained anger, but anger wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. Then, through the thick silence of the car, a voice crackled over the police radio. Dispatch to Unit 3 to 4, stand by. Parents of the missing child have confirmed, confirmed, that the suspect in custody was assisting their daughter and is not a threat. You are to release him immediately. For the first time, neither officer had a smug remark. Sean saw Grant's hands tighten around the wheel, his jaw twitching. Reed muttered something under his breath before reluctantly grabbing the radio. Copy that, dispatch. But even as he said it, his voice was stiff, unwilling. Like he couldn't quite believe he had to let Sean walk away. Like it was an inconvenience. The cruiser slowed, pulling off into an empty parking lot. The moment the tires stopped rolling, Reed twisted in his seat, his eyes sharp with annoyance. Guess you got lucky today, he muttered as he yanked the door open and reached for Sean's cuffs. Sean held still as the metal dug into his wrists one last time before finally clicking open. He pulled his hands forward, rubbing his sore skin, but he didn't say a word. Get out, Reed ordered flatly. Sean stepped out of the car, his limbs stiff from tension. The cool evening air hit him like a slap, the distant hum of the city feeling surreal after the suffocating confines of the cruiser. Grant leaned against the hood, arms crossed. Take some advice, he said, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. Next time, don't put yourself in situations like this. Sean let out a slow breath through his nose, shaking his head. Situations like what? He asked, his voice calm, measured. Helping a lost kid? Grant smirked, as if the answer was obvious. You figure it out. Sean's chest tightened, but he didn't give them anything else. No anger. No frustration. No reaction. Instead, he turned and walked away. Because that was all he could do. As he stepped further from the car, another voice rang out, this time one he actually wanted to hear. Sean. Lily. She was sprinting toward him, Rebecca and Daniel following close behind. Before he could even process it, Lily crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around him in a tight hug. You're back, she sniffled into his shirt. I thought they took you forever. Sean blinked down at her, his throat tightening. He gently placed a hand on her curls, swallowing against the lump in his throat. Nah, kiddo, he murmured. I told you I wasn't leaving you, didn't I? Rebecca reached them, her eyes rimmed with red, her expression torn between relief and fury. Sean, I am so sorry, she said, voice shaking. We told them. We told them what happened. They never should have, she cut herself off, pressing a hand to her mouth as she took in the bruises on his wrists. Daniel looked just as wrecked, his hands on his hips, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. This is bullshit, he muttered, shaking his head. You saved our daughter, and they treated you like a threat, Sean finished for him. The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Rebecca exhaled shakily, pulling Lily closer. If there's anything we can do to fix this, to help you. Sean looked at her, then at Daniel, then finally back at Lily, who still hadn't let go of his hand. He let out a slow, tired sigh. Just raise her to know the difference, he said softly. Make sure she sees the world for what it is. And maybe one day, it won't be like this anymore. Rebecca's eyes filled with fresh tears. Daniel gave a solemn nod. And Lily, innocent, bright, full of love, just squeezed his hand tighter. I promise, she whispered. For the first time that night, Sean allowed himself to believe in something good. Even if it was just for a moment. The dashboard camera's red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Sean locked his gaze on it, knowing at least someone would see what was happening. "You got nothing to say now?" Reed sneered over his shoulder, taunting him. Grant chuckled, tapping the steering wheel. "Bet he's regretting it now. You know how long they lock people up for this? You're done, man." Sean stayed silent, staring out the window, forcing himself to breathe, to stay calm. Then Grant smirked. "Bet you got a record, huh? Possession? Theft?" Reed tapped his phone, then scoffed. "Clean record. Guess you were one of the good ones, until today." Their laughter filled the car. The cruiser pulled into the station. Floodlights cast long shadows as officers leaned against patrol cars, chatting. No one paid attention as Grant dragged Sean from the car, shoving him forward. Inside, the sterile air reeked of cleaning solution, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "Straight to processing," Reed ordered, but Grant grinned. "We got time, don't we?" Sean's gut twisted. He glanced down the empty hallway. "Yeah," Reed muttered, cracking his knuckles. "We got time." Sean's voice was steady. "You know the dash cam caught everything, right?" Reed smirked. "Not here. This hallway's a blind spot. Ain't nobody watching now." A blow slammed into Sean's ribs. Pain shot through his body. Before he could recover, another punch landed in his gut. His knees buckled, but they held him up, laughing. "Where's your little friend now?" Grant mocked, driving another hit into his side. Sean gasped, his vision blurring as he collapsed onto the cold concrete. Blood dripped from his lip. He struggled to focus, his eyes landing on something past them. The camera. A small, blinking red light. He coughed, forcing himself to lift his head. His voice was hoarse, but strong. "You messed up," he muttered. Reed and Grant froze. Their eyes flicked to the camera. Their smugness cracked. Reed scoffed. "Doesn't matter. We'll say you resisted." Sean's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "Yeah? You can try." For the first time, they looked unsure. Then the station door burst open. Lily. Rebecca and Daniel stormed in, fury radiating off them. Lily broke free from her mother's grip, sprinting straight for Sean. "Sean!" She threw herself into his arms, her small body shaking. "They hurt you." Sean held her tightly. "I'm okay, kiddo." Rebecca turned, her voice razor sharp. "Which one of you did it?" She glared at Reed and Grant, who refused to look up. "He saved my daughter, and you treated him like a criminal." Daniel folded his arms, his voice cold. "Lawyers are on the way. Hope you're ready." Sergeant Wallace stepped forward, his eyes full of quiet judgment. "Reed. Grant. My office. Now." They scrambled up like schoolboys caught misbehaving. "Get comfortable," Wallace muttered. "This is gonna be a long one." The door slammed behind them. Silence settled, thick with tension. Daniel turned to Sean. "You good, man?" Sean exhaled, still holding Lily's hand. "Yeah. We're good." Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, brushing back her curls. "You did good, baby. You stayed strong." Lily sniffled. "But why did they hurt him?" Rebecca hesitated. Sean crouched to Lily's level, looking her in the eyes. "Sometimes people do bad things because they're scared. And sometimes because they think they're better than you. But you saw the truth. And that means they can't hide it." Lily wiped her face, nodding. Rebecca stood, lifting her chin. "You're coming with us." Daniel extended a hand. "You ain't walking out of here alone." Sean took it, standing tall despite the pain. Rebecca, Daniel, and Lily by his side. They walked toward the door, past silent officers and watching eyes. The weight of every stare pressed against them. Sean didn't look back. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a cleansing wave. Daniel muttered, "Cameras caught everything." Sean's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Yeah. I know." Rebecca's voice was like steel. "They're done." Sean nodded, gaze fixed forward. "Yeah. They were."